1 pound of bird. 15 cognitive abilities that used to belong exclusively to humans. This is every documented case of a crow overpowered ranked. Urban crows in Sendai, Japan figured out they needed a walnut cracked, so they outsourced the job. They drop nuts onto traffic lanes, wait for cars to crush them, then retrieve the meat during the red light pedestrian phase. A walnut needs around 330 pounds of force to crack. A crow weighs roughly 1 pound. So it conscripted a Toyota to do 330 times its own body weight in labor, then strolled out on the green man signal like a commuter. A tier. Then there's Gabi Man, an 8-year-old girl from Seattle who started dropping food scraps near her house around 2011. The crows noticed, and then they started paying her back. By 2015, Gabi had a labeled collection of dozens of crow-delivered objects: buttons, a broken light bulb, a miniature silver ball, a black bead, a blue plastic piece, and a small pearl-colored heart. Every item cataloged, bagged, and stored like a tiny natural history museum, curated entirely by birds. University of Washington researcher John Marsloff confirmed it wasn't coincidence. The crows were engaging in genuine reciprocity, adjacent social behavior, a scientific way of saying an 8-year-old accidentally bootstrapped a functioning barter economy with wild animals in her backyard. They bring me things because I bring them food. She said that like it was obvious. Meanwhile, most adults can't maintain a friendship that consistent. A tier. Now this will show the crow actually overpowered. In 2008, researchers at Goethe University ran the mark test on Eurasian magpies, corvid family, same cognitive neighborhood. They stuck a colored dot on the bird where it couldn't see it without a mirror, then watched. The magpies used the mirror to locate the mark, then physically scratched at it on their own bodies. That's self-recognition, the same test that filters out great apes, dolphins, and elephants from everything else on Earth. At the time, a magpie was the only non-mammal to pass it, with a brain the size of a walnut, apparently grasping its own reflection better than most species with significantly more brain to work with. Passing that test means the magpie holds a mental model of itself as a distinct individual. S tier. So self-recognition is locked in, but numerical cognition? That was supposed to be ours too. Lab studies show crows can distinguish quantities up to 8 and match Arabic numerals, actual symbols, not objects, to corresponding counts. The same brain region humans use for this. Researchers found crows vocalizing specific quantities on command after extended training, something previously undocumented in any non-human animal. And somehow, a bird that can't read a textbook apparently understands what the number 4 means. That's abstract symbolic reasoning, wearing feathers. B tier. John Marsloff, University of Washington, 2012. His team documented crows gathering around a dead crow, silently, in groups, for up to 30 minutes. Then they leave, and they don't come back. That exact location gets flagged in their mental map as a danger zone, permanently. One dead crow becomes a community-wide hazard warning, shared without a single word. The thing is, this isn't grief in the greeting card sense. It's faster and more efficient than that. A crow dies, the flock runs a threat assessment, updates the collective geography, and redistributes the risk data across every bird present. Which sounds like a trauma response because that's exactly what it is. B tier. So Marsloff wasn't done after the funeral study, because in 2009, he ran something even more unsettling out of the University of Washington. His team trapped crows while wearing a specific caveman mask, one mask, documented the birds' reactions, released them, and moved on. Then, 5 years later, the same mask showed up on campus, and the crows lost it. Targeted scolding, dive bombing, full mob recruitment, other crows joining in on a threat they had never personally experienced. Birds who were never trapped, touched, and never in the original study were going absolutely feral at a rubber caveman face. The researchers confirmed it. The grudge had been socially transmitted across generations. And the thing is, this isn't just memory. A crow remembers a face, sure, but this crow told another crow. That crow told a younger crow. And now you've got a lineage of birds carrying inherited beef against the Halloween mask from 2009. Which sounds like something a mob family does, because apparently that's exactly what it is. Marsluff's team found that over time, the number of scolding crows actually increased, meaning the grudge was spreading faster than it was fading. The original wrong was getting amplified through social transmission, not diluted. One bad afternoon for a trapped crow became a 5-year vendetta with a growing subscriber count. A tier. In 2008, Josh Klein walked onto the TED stage and announced he'd built a coin-operated vending machine for crows. Not as a gimmick, as a proof of concept. The machine dispensed peanuts in exchange for coins deposited into a slot. He left it outside. Crows found loose coins nearby. In under a week, they had figured out the entire transaction chain themselves. Self-taught operant conditioning with actual currency. Nobody taught them what a coin was. They reverse-engineered the exchange mechanism through observation and trial, then started actively foraging for coins as a resource category. They didn't learn a trick. They learned an economy. Which sounds insane until you remember, these are the same birds holding multi-generational grudges over a Halloween mask. B tier. In 2014, Cambridge University researchers handed rooks a water-filled tube with a floating worm just out of reach. No training. The crows dropped stones into the tube, raised the water level, and ate the worm. Replicating Aesop's fable of the thirsty crow almost beat for beat, written around 600 BC. But here's the detail that makes this genuinely unsettling. They didn't just drop any stones. They selected larger stones over smaller ones and solid objects over hollow ones, demonstrating an understanding of displacement physics that most adults would have to think about twice. Aesop apparently wrote this as a moral about cleverness. Cambridge confirmed it was a field report. A tier. Now meet a jay that can plan its breakfast before going to sleep. In 2007, Cambridge researcher Nicola Clayton ran a study on western scrub jays that quietly broke one of the last fences around human cognition. She pre-showed jays specific breakfast locations and, crucially, told them which locations would have no food the next morning. The jays then cached food in those future food-free spots the night before, not the spots with guaranteed food, the empty ones. They were packing a lunch for a future self that didn't exist yet. This isn't just memory. Memory is, I hid food here. This is tomorrow, that location will have nothing, so tonight, I need to fix that. That's episodic future thinking, projecting yourself into a future scenario and acting on it now. Until then, researchers had considered that basically a human specialty. A jay apparently didn't get the memo. S tier. Then there's the part where it gets personal. Clayton's lab, same researcher and jays, ran a follow-up that didn't just test memory, it tested moral reasoning. When a scrub jay was watched by another bird while caching food, it would return later, alone, and quietly re-hide the cache in a completely different spot. Standard paranoia, you might think. But here's the thing, only jays who had previously stolen food from other birds' caches did this. Jays with no theft record? They didn't bother moving anything. The bird was projecting its own criminal history onto an observer and preemptively covering its tracks. That's a theory of mind. The documented understanding that another individual holds different knowledge than you do, combined with active deception to exploit that gap. Researchers call this experience projection. Psychologists call it the foundation of lying. A scrub jay apparently calls it Tuesday. The only non-human animals confirmed to demonstrate theory of mind before this were great apes. Then a bird that weighs 4 ounces quietly joined that list by outsmarting a peer it assumed was a thief, because it would know. S tier. New Caledonian crows craft 2 structurally distinct tools from pandanus leaves. The first is a stepped cut rake, a wide, serrated edge for raking grubs out of shallow surface gaps. The second is a narrow, hooked probe, designed for deep cylindrical holes with different internal geometry. And the key word is selected. These birds aren't just grabbing whatever's nearby. They're surveying the problem, cross-referencing it against their toolkit, and deploying the right instrument. That's a diagnostic step. That's what a mechanic does before touching the car. They also manufacture both tools in advance before they've even located food. Pre-built, carried, sorted by task type. A tier. In 2002, at Oxford University, a New Caledonian crow named Betty was handed a straight piece of wire. There was a small bucket sitting at the bottom of a vertical tube, too far down to reach, too narrow to fit a beak. Betty needed a hook. Nobody gave her one. She bent the wire herself. Against the edge of the tube, Betty fashioned a curved hook from a completely straight piece of material she had never encountered before, then used it to lift the bucket. First attempt, no training. The researchers watched and, apparently, had a small crisis about everything they thought they knew about birds. And the thing is, this wasn't operant conditioning. She wasn't rewarded for bending the wire in incremental steps. She looked at the problem, looked at the material, and manufactured the solution on the first try. S tier. BBC Springwatch 2014 set up an 8-step sequential puzzle for a New Caledonian crow they nicknamed 007. 8 steps, in order. Pull the right lever, move the right stone, unlock the right compartment, each action unlocking the next, all to retrieve a piece of meat at the end. The kind of thing you'd hand to a bored chimpanzee in a lab study and use as a benchmark score. ER07 matched the benchmark. The crow worked through all 8 stages in the correct sequence, pulling levers, repositioning stones, and unlocking compartments like he'd read the instruction manual, except, obviously, there wasn't one. And here's what makes this different from Betty bending the wire. Betty solved one novel problem spontaneously. 007 executed a multi-stage sequential plan, which means he held the entire chain of operations in working memory, understood that step 3 was meaningless without step 2, and suppressed the impulse to immediately grab the meat at intermediate stages where an animal running on instinct would have quit. Researchers use 8-step sequential problem solving as a chimpanzee benchmark specifically because it requires forward planning, impulse control, and causal reasoning simultaneously. UO07 just happened to be a bird. S tier. University of Washington researchers confirmed that urban crow populations develop region-specific alarm calls, local dialects, and young crows learn the local accent through cultural transmission, not instinct. Same mechanism as human language spread across geography. A crow born in Seattle doesn't automatically speak Chicago. It has to learn it. They're not just intelligent, they're culturally literate. A tier. Bernd Heinrich spent years in the Maine woods watching ravens solve a problem that would stump most middle managers. A dominant pair guards a carcass. Smaller ravens can't fight their way in, so what do? They recruit strangers. Heinrich's 1999 book, Mind of the Ravens, documented ravens actively rallying unrelated birds with zero personal stake, into a coordinated mob large enough to overwhelm the guarding pair. Not begging and waiting, deliberately assembling a third-party coalition to redistribute access to a resource they couldn't reach alone. Heinrich published this a full decade before most of the lab studies on this list existed, which somehow makes it feel worse. Wild ravens, no training, no reward pellets, just pure calculated manipulation in a snowy field. A raven looked at a problem, decided it needed allies, and went and made some. A tier. Ravens in Alaska were filmed sliding down snow-covered rooftops on their backs. Not once, repeatedly, sliding down, walking back up, sliding again. No food involved, no survival function, Just a raven, apparently, having the time of its life on a roof, documented as the clearest case of object play purely for enjoyment ever recorded in wild birds. They invented sledding. B. Tier. So we've established that crows remember faces, hold funerals, plan for the future, manufacture tools, and apparently invented sledding. But here's the thing, all of that is almost wholesome compared to what they do when you actually wrong them. Marsloff's mask study follow-ups didn't just show that crows remembered threatening faces, they showed crows acting on that memory. Individuals who had previously trapped or handled crows, sometimes months prior, were dive-bombed, mob-recruited, and systematically harassed in targeted campaigns. The crow would scold, then a second crow would arrive, then a third. Within minutes, a single grudge becomes a coordinated airstrike. And it wasn't random aggression, it was specific. The same person, the same face, months later. They will absolutely follow you and yell at you and dive-bomb your head. One documented case had a crow bombing a researcher every single time he entered campus, but ignoring everyone around him. The crow had a list. He was on it. That's a personal vendetta with a flight plan. John Marsloff's team confirmed this behavior extends socially. Crows who weren't personally harmed joined the harassment after watching the original victim crow's response. The grudge became community property. This isn't a defense mechanism. This is a crow deciding someone deserves consequences and then organizing the consequences. S tier. Okay, so everything we've covered, all of that, still isn't the top of the tier list. Because in 2009, Auckland University researchers handed New Caledonian crows a problem that had never been solved by any bird in recorded history. The food was out of reach. The tool long enough to reach it was locked inside a separate box. The only thing available was a short tool, too short to reach the food, but just long enough to retrieve the longer tool from the box first. 2 steps, sequential, abstract, and the crows did it. They used the short tool to retrieve the longer tool, then used the longer tool to reach the food. A meta-tool sequence, tool to get a tool. That, before this study, had only ever been demonstrated by great apes. The thing is, this wasn't trial and error. Researchers documented that multiple birds completed the sequence with clear intentionality, not stumbling into the solution, but working through it. Apparently, evolution just decided feathers and flight weren't enough. S tier. Obviously, .S. Now, this gives you the answer. Are they actually overpowering? Subscribe to the channel for more tier lists like this.